Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Chairman, CEO, and co-founder of the Blackstone Group, Mr. Stephen A. Schwarzman, and White House Senior Advisor, Mr. Jared Kushner.
Welcome, Jared. As you know, the President's first foreign trip was here to Saudi Arabia in 2017, where his goal was to reinvigorate the relationship between the U.S. and the region. How do you think we've done? What's been accomplished since then?
Thank you, Steve, and thank you all, and thank you to the Crown Prince and to the King and to everyone for having us here. I think that this forum is actually a good example of some of the progress that is being made in the Middle East. There's so much talk and so many people who get together to talk about the problems that the Middle East has, the problems that they've had, but there's not enough focus on what the potential and what the great opportunity is for the future of the Middle East. When the President decided to do that trip, the focus was, at the time, we were coming off of a previous administration. We saw Iran being emboldened. We saw ISIS had a major caliphate in the middle of the Middle East. We saw that the spreading of extremism and the ideology and the financing of terrorism was a major problem. And we wanted to get focused on how do we turn the future and how do we roll these things back. And I think we've made progress on all those fronts. And I didn't even mention all the problems, but seeing the discussions that are happening here and really the future of what the Middle East can be really has to start with investment, it has to start with opportunity, it has to start with people working together and trying to find a way to create more jobs, more opportunities so that people can see a path for a brighter future so that some of the distracting and more destructive things that people have focused on in the past will not be the pathway that the next generation takes.
So in June of this year, you hosted and organized a conference in Bahrain on a Middle East peace plan, and you had a very interesting economic plan for the Palestinians. So where do you think that sits at the moment?
So I think that that's another one of the problems in the region, which I don't think if you solve the issue between the Israelis and the Palestinians, you solve all the regions and all the problems in the region, because the problems here are plentiful. But I do think that if you solve that issue, it takes a major issue out of the way of making progress towards bringing everyone together. And what we see in the region now is leaders who are trying to create a better economic future for their people, and people who are trying to use religion and whatever other excuses they can find to repress people and keep people divided. And so the thought behind Bahrain, which was really the vision of a lot of the leaders here, was that we would show what the future of the Palestinian people could be in the event that we built a good opportunity. In Saudi Arabia, they've done a Vision 2030. They focused on how do they empower the people here and how do they bring opportunity. We wanted to see what it could look like to do the same for the Palestinian people. We brought business leaders together from throughout the region and from throughout the world. And I think it sent a strong message that the world would like to see that resolved. The world cares about the Palestinian people. But more importantly, that Israel is not the cause of all of the suffering of the Palestinian people. If you think about a lot of the people here are investors. If you wanted to go and invest in the West Bank, or if you wanted to invest in Gaza, the issue that's holding you back today is the fact that there's fear of terrorism and that your investments could be destroyed or displaced. If you get over those, if we're able to solve the terror issues, then you have the issue of there's no good governance. You don't have you have a lot of corruption, and you can't feel confident that, say, Blackstone would want to go and put investments down there. But what we did is show that there is a framework that can be created. And in the last panel, we were listening to some of the people who do the development banks. There's a lot of great criteria that could be implemented there that could make those areas more investable. And if we make those areas more investable, then there could be much greater opportunities. So, you put that together with trying to resolve some of the political issues that have been stale for a very long time, and I am hopeful that we're able to make some progress in that area.
Yeah, one of the things I was impressed with this plan, it involved only around $25 billion of capital for the Palestinians, and only $5 billion of equity. So it seemed to me to be pretty doable if you had the preconditions politically to do it.
Yeah, there's no shortage of money that's being thrown at that problem right now. There's been more money put into that situation than almost any refugee situation. You have 70 million refugees in the world. The Palestinians were 800,000 refugees that have mushroomed now to about 5 million people. But you look at a lot of the African countries, you look at a lot of the different areas in this region where $50 billion of investment could go a long way. And if you do it in a coordinated fashion with a plan, you could really create the environment where private capital will be willing to come in. So we've had it peer reviewed. We released about 140 pages of detail. We had hundreds of projects that we've identified and really got a lot of good compliments on the business plan. Now we just need to have the right environment, the right leadership in order to execute it. So again, it's very easy in the Middle East to find the problems. It's very easy to find the reasons why things can't happen or shouldn't happen. But I think that the job of the leader should be to try to chart what is the future we want to see for the people, and then what are the hard things that we have to do to achieve them. And if the things were easy and if they were obvious, they would have been done a long time ago. But I think that's why there are a lot of great leaders. We just heard from His Majesty King Abdullah, who's also trying to bring a lot of great economic opportunities now to Jordan so that he could give his people a better life, more opportunities, higher wages. And I think that's a very important feature towards creating more stability in the region, which, quite frankly, I think is tired of all of the conflict.
Let's focus on the U.S. elections. There's very little more interesting than the show that we can all tune into almost every night. So we have over 20 Democratic candidates, and that's what we spend most of our time evaluating, or at least observing. There is still a Republican that's going to run, and things have been quiet there, except there's a lot going on while it's quiet. So maybe you could bring people up to date.
Well, the election now is about a year away, and which is an eternity in politics. But the president's almost done with his third year now in office. We've been doing politics now for 4 years. It took us about a year to do the campaign. And what we're finding is that the enthusiasm for the president right now at home is stronger than it's ever been. The president came in the last campaign and he was saying, I promise if I'm elected, I'll do this. I promise if I'm elected, I'll do that. Now he's kept a lot of his promises and he's accomplished things that are far greater than people expected. Our economy right now has historic record lows for unemployment. Wages are growing at the fastest rate possible. We've done a ton of deregulation. We've allowed businesses to flourish, which means that they're expanding. They're doing a lot of capital investment thanks to the tax reform that we passed and the tax cuts. And what we're finding is that the American economy is doing well. In the meantime, the president's done a lot of work to strengthen the alliances that perhaps were neglected in the previous administration. And what we found is that by working with our partners and our allies throughout the world, we're able to create better burden sharing, and we're able to find ways to hopefully resolve some of the more difficult situations in the world without escalating them. And so, again, all the things that the people were saying who were against the president last time were saying would happen that were bad if the president won haven't happened. And then, the next morning the sun rose, and the next evening the sun set, and America's gotten more and more prosperous. And I think people really like what the president's doing. So we feel very strong about it. There's great enthusiasm. And I think we also have the benefit of having a very strong campaign this time. And the fact that last time we were figuring it out as we go. We didn't do politics before. We did a lot of things right. But this time, the things that we did well last time we're doing a lot more of, we're doubling and tripling down of, and we have more time and a better team this time in order to really execute very professionally. But at the end of the day, running a campaign is about certain details. The most important thing is having the right candidate with the right ideas, and I think the country really likes the policy direction the president's been taking. And again, it's strong leadership, it's purposeful leadership. I think we've turned the country in a good direction, but there's a lot more work to do, and that's why hopefully the American people will give President Trump a second term to do that.
So what's happening with fundraising?
It's very strong. People are excited about what the president's doing, but most of it comes from small donors. It comes from the American citizens who donate online to the president because they love that for the first time they feel like they have a politician who's fighting for them.
And I've heard you've done some really innovative stuff in the digital area, which was a real source of strength before.
Yeah, well, in today's day and age, you can market in a much different way. I remember when I was younger, I met an executive who was at Coca-Cola, And I asked why they advertised all over the place, and he said, well, we know half of our advertising doesn't work, we just don't know which half doesn't work, so we do it all. And right now, with the tools that are available through digital, you can be much more purposeful. So what we've been able to do is build a very big database, and we have a way to communicate very directly with a lot of the president's followers, and then with a lot of the people who could potentially be the president's followers. So, the president has an interesting relationship with the media, but in a lot of ways, the reason he's been able to be effective and why his popularity is growing is because he's able to speak directly to the American people and have the feedback loop that's much more direct.
Let's finish up with the issue of the trade dispute between the U.S. and China. This has affected almost every country in the world in some way. Manufacturing globally is really down. The global economy is slowing. What are the prospects, do you think, for turning this around?
So I think there is a lot of positive potential out there. Obviously, the president's been talking about the imbalance in trade for 30 years and how he feels like America was getting the raw deal. And the origins of this really go back to the Second World War, where you had a situation where America was by far the wealthiest country in the world, and the whole notion that was created as a world order was America should try to figure out a way to protect a lot of the world, and then also a way to do disproportionate market access with everyone, so that a lot of these countries that were ravaged by war could then build up. And probably somewhere around the 80s we should have rebalanced it, but we just never did. So you have a lot of very wealthy countries now that have asymmetric market access with America, and that's caused a lot of our middle-class manufacturing jobs to leave. And then in 2001, when China joined the World Trade Organization, that really accelerated, and obviously the NAFTA deal as well, which was 94, that also really accelerated the trend. So we've had over 70,000 factories in America have closed, which has led to an erosion of a lot of the working-class manufacturing jobs. So the president came in with a promise to turn that around, and it's very, very hard to do, but he focused on actually taking on them all at once, which a lot of people thought wasn't a good strategy, but now he's getting to a point where he's been successful. We renegotiated the Mexico-Canada agreement, which I was very involved with Ambassador Lighthizer. That's about 40% of our exports. That deal is $1.3 trillion a year, largest trade deal in history. And hopefully Congress will ratify that when they get around to it, which would be a very good thing for the American economy. That should add about 0.5 point to America's GDP forever, and probably about anywhere between 200,000 and 500,000 more jobs, which is a very important trade deal. We redid the deal with Japan. We redid our deal with South Korea. Europe, we're still going back and forth with on some things. And then with China, there's a lot of issues that we addressed that, quite frankly, were neglected for far too long. And I think we had a very honest dialogue with China, but they saw that we were serious because a lot of these issues weren't even U.S.-China issues. Issues like intellectual property is really, China versus civilization, and it's people who either want to have a rules-based system or not. So I think people understand the president. They know that he's firm. They know that he's going to make the decisions that he thinks are right. And I think ultimately we've come to an understanding with China now on where we want to head. And I think that Secretary Mnuchin, who's here, and Ambassador Lighthizer have done a fabulous deal on the front lines of that negotiation. And I think the president is a realist of it. And I had one person who said to me that what the president's done on trade is perhaps one of the bravest things that he's done as president, because all of the costs of it, the tariffs, the retaliation that people have put on, he's paid the price for during his presidency, but the benefit in terms of all the jobs now that are going to come back to America because of the different trade deals that we've made will probably happen, to the people who are, long beyond him. And so it's been very successful for the country. I think one of our biggest problems now as a country is we don't have enough workers. And so we're seeing a lot of people who are not in the workforce coming off the sidelines, and we're seeing wages rising, which is very good for the American consumer. So overall, it's been a very transformational period. If you look at the body of work over 3 years, though, the president's been very successful at accomplishing the things that he wanted to accomplish, and he's made America, I think, as competitive as it can be, and I think that in doing that, we've been able to strengthen a lot of partnerships, because a lot of these partnerships, when they're based on fair deals and mutual understandings, then they become much more long-term durable, and that's really the thought that the president wants to leave behind when he's done hopefully changing the structure of how America interacts with a lot of its allies.
Well, Jared, thanks for being here, but really thanks for disrupting a normal life. Public service isn't the easiest thing to do, and you've made an enormous effort and impact on the country and on the world.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everything you do and all the great work that you've done to really impact so many people.
Yeah, I'm actually not a full-time interviewer. This is not what I normally do. But.
That's great. Thank you.